Hey guys, welcome to the answers to the Q&A. This is later than I planned on doing it, but whatever, it's like a week late. Anyway, you're getting your answers. So I have some questions on Instagram. I'm going to answer those first, and then I'm going to answer the ones from YouTube. So the first question was about enjoying my life on a budget, which I did a whole separate video on, and that will pop up there. The second question is, do you have supportive friends or family who will be there for you post-adoption when you need rest and sleep? Yes and no. Currently, not so much. I'm purposely trying to make more friends. Not a very social person. I prefer to be alone and would rather not do social events. But because I know I'm going to need that support, I'm purposely trying to find support for that. So I do have a couple friends at work that have already offered to babysit. And I have a couple people that I know would if I needed something, I can call them and be like, hey, I can't get out of the house today. Can you bring me blah, blah, blah? And they would help me with that. In terms of family, I have no family here currently, but my brother is planning on moving here either this summer, so summer 2018, or next summer 2019, which would be a huge help if he's not specifically where this town that I'm in. He'd be in Medicine Hat, which is a quick drive, and he'd be able to help me just with some support. However, I wouldn't have him for longer babysitting periods because he won't change diapers. So possibly my mom and dad will move here eventually. I don't know when that's gonna be. The majority of my support right now is online, to be honest, just because the community that I'm living in isn't an adoption community. There isn't a lot of people with Down syndrome. There's not a lot of people adopting, stuff like that. So it's just, I have way more support than I've ever had in my life, but it's just not overflowing with support. But I'm trying to make an effort to meet more people. How is your family taking the news of your adoption? My family loves that I'm adopting, or my mom does anyway. My mom never liked when I was TTCing. My family my aunt was adopted. My family just has completely been supportive of adoption. My cousin's friend adopted from China a million years ago. There's not a whole lot in my family physically here, but in terms of emotional support, no one cares. No one cares that she's not going to be biologically related. No one cares that she's going to have Down syndrome. No one cares that she's going to be from India. It's one of those things where love is stronger than blood, and that's just how my family is. And we've had a lot of times where not in my immediate family, me, my brothers, and my parents are very close, but in my extended family where blood means nothing to people and they treat each other like trash. So my family is very well aware that blood means nothing, and being biologically related to someone does not guarantee love, just like being not biologically related to someone doesn't mean that you won't love them and that you can't have a strong bond with them. Next one. Does Taylor enjoy being around kids? She hasn't been around kids lately. She loves babies. Loves babies. I think probably because they're small and they don't really move a whole lot. She loves them. She loves probably up till about a year, and then she's a little more cautious about them. When she was a puppy, I babysat quite a bit this little boy, and for a dog that doesn't care for a lot of people, she was protective of him, and she would play fetch with him. She would bring him a toy and he would just drop it. She would grab the toy, run around with it, and bring it back to him, and it was this cute little game that they played. She's really good with kids in general, as long as they're not hovering. Anytime people are hovering over her, she's not a huge fan. And kids coming into our space, as long as they're not crazy loud, but for the most part she has no issues with kids, especially females. She's fine with all females, usually. How do you think she'll adjust to the new family member? So this is what honestly I'm really worried about. I don't think she'll have an issue eventually, because if you've ever seen any of my vlogs with my family and Taylor does not like men. She will cuddle up with my dad. She will cuddle up with my brothers. Once she gets used to someone, she loves them to death. My mom is her favorite person in the whole wide world, possibly more than me. So I can see her taking on that big sister role where she just absolutely loves her. I think it's going to take some time, especially because Emmy is going to take up the majority of my time, whereas things like right now, Taylor's with me. Taylor is with me 99% of the time that I'm home. If I'm on the computer, she might go lie down, but she's like in the vicinity. Whereas once Emmy's home, Emmy's going to take up more time. Emmy's probably going to be crying and louder. Also, Emmy will be darker skinned, which Taylor is not been exposed, unfortunately, to a lot of people of different skin colors. So we'll see. I'm actually working with Taylor right now on getting out more, both for her and myself, getting out more. And once the weather gets warm, I plan on taking her out more publicly. And I'm hoping during that time she'll get more used to things. She has been in rooms with a bunch of kids and been fine. She's just not Shulva. My previous dog loved kids, loved people, loved dogs, loved life. And like I used to take him to work with me all the time, and he'd play in my classroom with my kids, and he was totally cool. Taylor I took maybe twice, but she was very overwhelmed. So anyway, I think she'll do fine. I think she'll struggle a bit at first when Emmy first comes home, and it's this big adjustment for her, because it's going to be a big adjustment. But stuff like right now, the fact that me and her are sitting in Emmy's room, this room isn't like some tainted place where all of a sudden this little girl's going to come home and Taylor's not allowed in it. One, I'm not going to make her not go in it. Two, it's going to be a comfortable area for her. I just think at first she'll have to get used to the lack of my time, and she'll also have to get used to this thing that's in our house all the time. What made you want to adopt a child specifically with Down syndrome? So I did do a video on this quite a while ago, but I'll post the link up there. I'm going to try to make this short. But basically, 2014, okay, backtrack. Around 2012, me and a friend were talking about adoption, and I like vividly remember us talking about Down syndrome. And at the time, I was working in a school that was primarily fetal alcohol, or children with fetal alcohol, and we were discussing fetal alcohol versus Down syndrome. And we were like, Down syndrome is scary. Down syndrome, I have no clue how to deal with. At least children with fetal alcohol, we have the background knowledge, blah, 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 blah. And I remember vividly saying, I will never adopt a child with Down syndrome because it's that scary. Fast forward to 2014, when I was starting the private adoption stuff, I was going through every single possible disability, special need, and I was thoroughly researching them because I didn't want it to be like I'm saying no because I don't understand it. And so there's quite a few that actually surprised me that I was like, oh, that seemed really scary, but now that I know more, I'm totally open to it. Down syndrome was one of those. I went from no way, I'm never adopting a child with Down syndrome to, oh my gosh, I want to adopt a child with Down syndrome. Just doing that research and seeing how not scary it was. And so 2014, when I met with the agency, I did specifically ask them about Down syndrome. Their response was, we don't tend to get children with Down syndrome. We've never had kids with Down syndrome just because of the fact that usually they're aborted. So that was kind of like, oh, I really felt called to do this, but okay, whatever. And then with the infertility stuff that happened, and when I was trying to decide in 2015 to do international adoption or IVF, and I was like, I really would love to adopt a little girl with Down syndrome. I really, really want to. And I met with an agency in summer of 2015, and I just was overwhelmed by the cost. The cost and the paperwork after just coming through failed private adoption. I just couldn't do it again. I couldn't do the home study. I just didn't have that. So that's when I decided to do IVF instead, or pursue IVF instead. And a few months later, when I was taking my last pre-baby vacation, because I'm like, I'm going to get pregnant with the IVF. Me and my brother were originally going to go on a vacation in December of 2015. Because of the way things worked out, I needed to switch the dates. So I switched it to the end of October 2015. My brother and I, at the hotel, were like, wow, there's a conference for people with Down syndrome here. Then we realized they're on our cruise ship. turns out the cruise ship that we went on was the Buddy Cruise. It's not obviously specifically only for people with Down syndrome or families with Down syndrome. It's an open cruise. It just happens that the conference happens on this cruise. And I was blown away. I truly felt like the dots had connected, so that not only did I have the background of medical issues and I had that book knowledge, I now physically saw families with children with Down syndrome and how they function day to day. I saw so many abilities versus the disability. Like the kids, like the little kids, I was like, holy smokes, these kids are kids. These kids are kids. If you took away the facial features of Down syndrome, you would have no clue that these kids had Down syndrome. Like, it was just seeing them be. It was amazing. And another vivid memory was, I would say she was teenager, young adult, and where we were, where our room was, the conference room was in another section, and it was on the same floor, but it was divided. So people kept getting lost. So very often we were saying, oh, you're looking for the conference room, you have to go blah, 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 blah. And we were giving them directions. And my brother, I don't remember where he was, but he wasn't with me. And there was this young adult with Down syndrome, and she was clearly very confused. And I said, oh, are you looking for the conference room? She said, yes. I'm like, okay, I can tell you how to get there. So we took the elevator, and I walked with her part of the way, and I told her how to get there. And I was just like, holy smokes, this is a bright child who, yes, has delays, very clearly has delays, but is on her own, has independence. I mean, this is a situation where she's able to have independence. She's not going to get lost on a cruise ship. There's enough people around. But here she is on her own, able to follow directions and able to just be. And that cruise was very, very eye-opening for me, just to be able to see all ends of the spectrum, from very young to adults with Down syndrome, as well as children that were more higher functioning, and then some other ones that were not so higher functioning. Like, there was a couple that were, I would say, young adults that were nonverbal, that used, that didn't even sign. Quite a few were signing. But there were some that were nonverbal, non-signing, and had no bowel control. There were some in wheelchairs. So there was a lot of variety, but it was just really, it was one of those times when you're like, fate put me on this cruise. Anyway, I was stubborn and tried to stick with the IVF. That didn't turn out. I fought a hard battle, but when it came down to, I remember there was a point with the embryo adoption that we were having a barbecue. I think it was like the day it fell through, or like a few days before it fell through. And I said to my parents, I said, if this does not work out, I'm done with all this stuff. I'm going straight to adoption, adopting a logo with Down syndrome. At that time, Bulgaria was my choice. I'm like, that's what I'm doing. And my parents were like, of course, yeah. They're like, that's what we would rather you do. So that's kind of like how that kind of turned about. My older brother is still, I think, on the fence sometimes about the Down syndrome stuff, but I think he's still looking at the disability and not the ability. Like when we talked about me adopting a second one, his thought was, I hope you adopt one that's not doesn't have Down syndrome, because his whole thing is, we tend to have a lot of intellectual conversations, and that's not going to happen with someone with Down syndrome, not to the point as someone that doesn't have an intellectual disability. So that's kind of how he is, but that's not his choice. That's not his choice. That's not his life. This is my life, not his. So if I choose to adopt a second one with Down syndrome, that's what I choose. And not saying I'm going to, but it's growing on me. In terms of Down syndrome versus other disabilities in other countries, beyond the fact that I've been very pulled towards adopting a child with Down syndrome, children with Down syndrome often do not get adopted internationally. Most people still have the stigma against people with Down syndrome, so there's not families lining up to adopt these children. And it's really sad, because a lot of these kids are like not favorites in institutions. The children that are favorites tend to be the ones that are typically developing, might have some disabilities, but not as big of a disability as Down syndrome. And a lot of people, when they're adopting, they're like, well, I'm willing to take cleft lip, cleft palate, club foot, but not Down syndrome. People aren't willing to open their hearts to something that is a lifelong disability. And it's kind of really sad, because when these kids age out, they're usually sold into prostitution or thrown on the streets. Many don't even survive the switch from a baby house to an adult institution, which sometimes happens around 5-6 years old. So it's really, really sad situation, and that was just a small part of why I chose Down syndrome. The pull on my heart is the stronger part. So yeah, I hope that kind of answered that. I know it was kind of like all over the place, but just my friend Tina quotes Steve Jobs, which I'm not a fan of Steve Jobs. I shouldn't say I'm not a fan of him. I'm not a fan of Apple products. But anyway, she quotes him, and there's a line that says, "You can't connect the dots looking forward." And I absolutely love that quote. I love when she reminds me that, because there's so many things that happen in my life that I'm like, why didn't that happen? Why didn't that work? Specifically with the adoption stuff and fertility stuff. And looking back, I can see where the dots connected. I can see why the fertility stuff didn't work out. I can see why the private adoption stuff worked out, because now if I was having that same conversation with that friend in 2012, I would have said the complete opposite now. I am terrified of adopting a child with fetal alcohol, which is what I would have had if I adopted privately where I was living before, and now I want to adopt a child with Down syndrome. So the dots have connected looking backwards. Yeah, like now I can see where dots connected. Stuff like the cruise. Like the cruise is like one of my major holy smokes moments. Where the heck is my Q&A? There we go. My holy smokes moments was walking on that cruise ship and being like, okay, universe, I'm listening. So anyway, once I stopped fighting the universe and I was finally like, okay, I'm gonna listen to you, things have fallen into place. Things have been a lot more smoother, and my life is more together. Anyway, so not so many questions on YouTube. So next question is, how do you keep yourself busy when you're not at work? What are your hobbies? Well, leaning out. So I just did a video recently on crafty classes I'm interested in taking. So often I'm trying to get rid of TV, which I might do a whole video on, but I'm trying to get rid of TV. So I've been trying to replace it with other things such as art and sewing and stuff like that. So that's basically my hobbies. I don't really go out a whole lot. I'm not a huge fan of going out. Staying at home, playing video games with puppy, pretty much what I like to do. Do you ever miss being back in Ontario? I don't miss Ontario, the physical aspect of being in Ontario. The driving there is crazy. The people there are not nice. It's very busy, very different feel. I miss the variety and landscape sometimes. Like I live in the desert, in the plains. There's no mountains here. There's no trees really. So I kind of miss that. But there's some areas that are more Ontario-ish. But it's a lot easier to drive here. Like for me to drive to Calgary, one straight flat road basically. There's a dip at some point, but very, very different. What I miss is my family. That's basically what it is. I miss being around my family. I don't miss the aspects of Ontario. If you took my entire family, and my best friend would be nice too, but my entire family and just picked them up and put them here, I would never go back to Ontario. I really wouldn't. Who are your closest friends? Online, I have more friends that I would talk to than in person. I only really have 2 people that I would consider in-person friends, and one's kind of not even an in-person friend. So Tina from Raising Vegan, we met online through YouTube, and then we met in person probably like 5 or 6 months after that. I can't remember. And I honestly haven't seen her in a year and a half in person. But she's one of my go-to people to talk to. She's very inspiring. When I have vegan questions, she has answers. Her kids are so stinking adorable. Yeah, I haven't seen her youngest since she was like yay big. But yeah, I do have some vlogs, I think, on my other channel, upsideofdown.ca, I think is the link, that of us doing some stuff. But she's probably one of my biggest, closest friends. My best friend from elementary school is my other friend. I talk to her more online than I see her in person, to be honest, too. She just had a baby in October, which was exciting. It was also kind of sad. Like, I was okay during her pregnancy, but then after the baby was born is when I found the jealousy came in, because I started TCCing around the time she met her boyfriend, and never in a million years did either of us think she would have a child before I did, because she was very much one of those people that were like, I don't want kids, I'm just gonna have dogs. And then she met her current boyfriend, and just over time she was like, you know what, I do want a child, and I want a child with him, like specifically he's the reason I want kids. So that's when things kind of switched. She's in some of my vlogs too. There's a Toronto baby show, I know she's in that vlog, so you can go check that out. That's on upsideofdown.ca. So she's on that vlog. But like, for instance, when we did that vlog, she was like trying to calculate when to TTC, and she got pregnant first cycle, which was exciting in a way. And I know she messaged me and was like, I just wish that it took, we divided the time. How about it took you 6 months to get pregnant and me 6 months to get pregnant, or me a year, you a year. Like, I know she felt some guilt in that too, but that's the way life is. And honestly, I'm very, 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 very happy to be adopting. I'm very glad I'm not pregnant. I never want to be pregnant, but I just wish things were a little faster in the adoption. And it's more harder to see, like, she has a kid now and I don't, and I'm still waiting, I'm still paying money, I'm still fighting, and I'm like 2 years from having my daughter home, which would be 7 years total. Whereas people like her get pregnant first cycle, have a kid in 9 months. It's like, I wanted a kid, I got pregnant, I had a kid, the end. And her sister, who I taught, I was an EA in her classroom, is pregnant. She was in kindergarten when I was an EA in her classroom, and she's pregnant. Her situation is different because my best friend is in like a loving relationship, a stable relationship. They both have good income. They bought a house. Like, they're in a good place, whereas her sister's not so much. But yeah, I totally lost my train of thought. But yeah, so like, it's just hard sometimes. And when we were younger and I would babysit or nanny, she would come with me, but I was always the one with the kid, and I was always the one changing diapers and stuff like that. And then like at Christmas time, we went out to the mall and to the movies, and it was weird because it's like, that's her kid. And yeah, sure, I held him and stuff and I fed him, but it's like, that belongs to her. All these years of me being the one with the baby, and now I'm the one that's not. She is. So anyway, longest answer to a question about who's your closest friends. But yeah, basically those are my only two friends, and they both live in Ontario. Yep. Eventually I think I'll make more friends here. I'm just not one that likes to make friends. I'm trying to make more of an effort to have a support system in place for when Emmy comes home, but it's just, I don't know. It's hard when you're a minimalist vegan that doesn't really like people. Anyway, what's your relationship with your younger brother, since we've seen a bit of your relationship with Jason? So Jason's my older brother, Brandon's my younger brother. Brandon doesn't get on vlogs very much because he doesn't like to be on camera. Jason is the one that we did a brother-sister tag on this channel, but if you follow upsideofdown.ca, my Upside of Down channel, we've gone on trips. He's my travel buddy. He traveled over to Alberta with me in summer. We are very close. We are pretty much twins. Like, if we weren't different ages, we would be twins. We're very close. Brandon has been like a little different. He has some delays that just have made the gap between our ages even bigger. So in terms of me and Brandon, we have had some vacations together, but they're more, I don't want to say forced, but I have to put in more effort to get along with him than I do with Jason. I just filmed a whole rant about him, and it was very, what's that word when you release your tension? It was very, I think cathartic is the word maybe I'm looking for. Anyway, I'm glad I filmed it because it was very relaxing, but I'm editing it out because I don't want to rant about my brother. I really don't. But his values and my values are not really the same, specifically in how much he values physical friends and family that are physically around him versus online friends who might emotionally be there for him, but if my parents were no longer alive or no longer able to care for him, he'd be screwed. I'm just gonna leave it as that. So anyway, that is the Q&A for this month. I'll do one again eventually. But thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Questions, comments, go down below. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you guys later. Bye, guys.